Expanding on the conversation, we speak to NEHAWU President Mike Shingange. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time, Mike. You are at loggerheads with the Department of Health as workers are saying that they want to be permanently employed and recognized. Talk to us about some of these cries.
Yes, good evening. Good evening to your viewers. Indeed, of course, we are at loggerheads with the department, but of course not as a department, the isolation of the state as a whole. Well, this is a matter of practice and the principle of the permanent job, particularly in the state, that you can't have a state that continue to benefit from the labor of workers, but those workers are not benefiting from the permanent employment and the job security, including the benefits that comes as a result of permanent jobs, including the rights that accrue, like the medical aid, like the protection of labor laws, like the pension, retirement, maybe provident funds like that. But also these people have worked for the Department of Health, not being employed by the Department of Health for over 20 years or 25 years. When they retire, they've got nothing to show that they've been rendering a very crucial and essential services of vulnerable people on the ground, in the villages and in the townships. So do think that any developmental state, any functional healthcare services can't be provided with people who are not certain of their job, with people who are permanent, even though the services that are provided itself is a permanent nature.
Now, since the health care workers' introduction in 2010, how has the department over the years justified the reasoning behind the current working conditions?
Absolutely no justification. In fact, they were not introduced only in 2010. Remember, in the olden days, we used to have a category of workers who have been called home-based care workers. These are the community health care workers today, but maybe because it's just a change of terminology. There's no justification because the reality is that the work they are doing is the work that the Department of Health can't do away of it. It cannot do without. It's a job that they can never wish it away. It has to be permanent in nature. And particularly if you talk about the introduction of the National Health Insurance, which, among others, emphasizes the issue of primary health care, which means that at the community level there must be a health education. At the community level, there must be a ward-based health team, which must have a category of the healthcare services, including the community healthcare workers. So the dream we have of national health insurance, the dream we have of a preventative healthcare system rather than a curative healthcare system will never happen as long as we do not have the teams in the villages and the teams in the townships, the teams in the homes that educate our people about health. And this category is mostly embedded on the community health care work. So there's no justification. They fail to even to make that justification today in court. They fail to make that justification even in the bargaining council. And that's why we have resorted to say one of the records we have, other than the bargaining councils, other than the boardrooms, it's also the legal fraternity of our country. But of course, the streets, as you will have seen today, is one of the avenues that the workers have at their disposal to push for their decent work and the dignity of anybody who works in this country.
Judgment has been reserved in that labour dispute between yourselves and the Department of Health. You have argued that the move goes against the Labour Relations Act. On the other end, the Department of Health has said that the Labour Relations Act does make provisions for prolonged contractual agreements. So what are your expectations from the court?
Well, without preempting and also respecting the fact that the judge has reserved the judgment, we are confident about the arguments that were presented in court, and we're also clear that the government was not able to make a justification of why they will prolong this employment. They failed to provide that justification. You remember that as things stand in terms of the Labour Relations Act now, you cannot, including the court judgment that exists now, which is the days of the labour brokering system in this country. You can't have a fixed contract that precedes, exceeds the 3 month period unless if it is justified by a collective agreement or any other 7 provisions that are provided in the Labour Relations Act. The current conditions of the community health care workers does not satisfy any of the provisions to justify why they must work beyond 3 months on a fixed contract. Even when we have had a collective agreement in the bargaining council that continues to get renewed, which is an indication of the need of the presence of this cohort of workers, but also the need of the service that they are providing. But at the same time, these people are perpetually being on a casual way, being exploited by a government that is supposed to even be a custodian of the labor protection in this country and supposed to at least to provide a guidance to private sector employers when they're supposed to, in terms of the labor protection. So we cannot have that in this country, but at the same time, it's our view that the judgment we think is going to be in our favor, and we know that even if it's in our favor, if government is possible, that's going to review it because they've done so in the past, and we have vowed that we will go up to the last court of the land in this country. Even if it goes against us, even if it goes in our favor and the government reviews, it's a matter that we are prepared to fight, because the matter of principle is no longer about the current cohort, but it's about the principle matter. It's about the precarious nature of the employment labor market in this country, where our workers, majority of the workers, are actually subjected to exploitation, whereas the bosses are extracting profit out of their labor.
Mike, very quickly before we let you go, we know that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is set to deliver the medium-term budget policy statement tomorrow. What do you think needs to be prioritized? What are your expectations?
Well, I'm sure, as you will know, we will be there tomorrow in the Parliament. We will be protesting. We will be demanding that we need a developmental and people-centered budget, because the budget we have come to experience over the past 5 years is a continuous and unabated cutting of expenditure to the public services. By public service, I mean including education, including health. I'm sure you will know now, as we speak, that there's a threat of the retrenchment of teachers in some provinces because of the projected budget cut that is going to come. So that we will be in Parliament tomorrow to demand that the budget must be at least strengthening the public service institutions, because majority of our people are relying on those institutions. So we will have expected positively the increase on that expenditure to alleviate the poverty and the unemployment that we have in the country. But knowing, particularly now in the advent of the government of national unity, which some of the parties are even against, is the very funding of the national health insurance, the very funding of the basic education labor amendment bill, the very funding of the Employment Equity Act. We suppose that we're going to have a misery of the budget, but however, we'll be there in our numbers tomorrow to remind the government of national unity that they represent the majority of the vulnerable people who are depending on the government for the cost of living that is so high in this country.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. We're going to have to leave it there. NEHAWU President Mike Shingange.